再见我说大家好。
I want to say hi everyone.
Et après cela, je vais vous saluer aussi en français. Bienvenue à tout le monde. S'il y a quelqu'un qui me comprend, s'il vous plaît, levez la main.
La 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 la.
Un peu. Il y a 2 personnes dans la salle qui me comprennent. I thought of starting out with a little language exercise to help you think a little bit about language.
我想要从一些语言上的不同的语言开始，让你来感受一下语言。
What do you feel like as you hear? What do you call me here? It's not 外国人。我是内国人。
本地人。
As you hear me speak in Chinese, what does that mean to you? What does that feel to you?
我在这里说中文，对你来说有什么感觉？
Does that feel a little bit good?
你觉得舒服吗？好，还不错吗？
And how do you feel hearing me speak in French?
那你觉得如果我说法文的时候，你又有什么感觉呢？
How do you feel with me speaking in French?
I feel you are getting the trouble.
So as we think about the world and the mission that God has for the world, we see some 7,000 languages around the world.
当我们做宣教传教到世界各地的时候，我们面对的是7000多种语言。
And we see there are many, many occasions for us to not understand one another.
我们有很多情况都是一组人不知道另外一组人在说什么。
And when you don't speak the same language, it's very hard to understand one another.
如果你们没有办法说同样的语言，我们没办法沟通。
But if you can speak the same language as someone, then it's very good.
当你可以说同一种语言的时候，那感觉是很好的。
It helps the information to get across,
那帮助那个资讯的传播，
and it helps the relationship grow.
也帮助关系的建立。
So I wanted to also say, I mentioned to Pastor Frank this morning, I was looking at some of your old sermons in preparing to come here today.
在我开始之前，我跟倪牧师聊了一下之前我们教会在讲的东西，然后我来准备一下我今天的内容。
And I saw that in one of these sermons, he started out by talking about the question of one church, two churches.
他其中有一个 sermon 讲到是一个教会还是两个教会。
And thinking about the idea that there are people on Zoom, hello, and there are people here in the room.
就像他也提到过，在 Zoom 那边的教会的朋友，跟现场在这边聚会的教会的朋友。
And it's easy for that kind of difference to feel like there's a personal difference.
那很容易就感觉到这是一个不一样的地方，然后也是个人选择这个模式上面不一样的地方。
Like there's one church there and there's one church here.
感觉上有时候像是那边是一个教会，我们这边是一个教会。
And I was very glad to hear Pastor Frank say, let's not let that happen. We are one church.
我很高兴倪牧师带出来一个重点，就是我们是一个教会，不论你是用什么方式聚会，我们还是一个教会。
So there are lots of ways that our enemy will attack our unity.
所以有很多方法呢，我们知道是怎么样形成，然后聚成一个教会。
Whether through language, through culture, through Zoom in person, masks or not, all kinds of ways.
有很多不同的方式，有时候我们觉得是你戴不戴口罩，有时候是你的文化，有的是你的语言，都可能形成一个教会。
And so as missionaries, we know these things too, because we also are relating with often different languages, different cultures.
身为一个宣教士，我常常面对这样的情况，我也知道这种情况。
And there's 2 different groups that we relate with a lot that I want to talk a little bit about here today. One is the church.
我要讲到我要讨论到2个 group 2个组群，一个是one is what?
The local church.
one 其中一个是我们这个地方教会。
Okay. And the other is language committees.
另外一个社群是这个社群，同一个语言的社群。
So where we go to Cameroon, we worship on Sunday morning in a local body.
在 Cameron 这个我们在那边聚会的时候，我们是身体上聚会，在同一个地方聚会。
And it's not because I'm a missionary, it's just because I'm a Christian.
我们在那边一起聚会，不是因为我是一个宣教士，而是因为我是一个基督徒。
But also, for my job, I relate to language committees.
但是以我的职责来说，我又隶属于语言上的一个族群。
And there's a group of people who speak a language who are governing what happens with that language. Maybe Christian, maybe not, but they care about the language.
但那个族群呢，他们的重点就是有关于语言，他们可能不是基督徒，可能是基督徒，但是他们因为共同的语言而组在一起。
And each church and each language committee has their own ideas about how to do things.
在这个地方教会的方式跟语言的社群，他们有不同的方式来聚会，不同的方式来讨论事情。
So I think about unity a lot because there's so many different ways that I see the church divided.
然后我想到的是这个合一，怎么样合一？因为对教会来说，有很多原因我们都会被分开。
And I should say that I speak with you of this church with pride because you are a unique example of unity for us.
我在这里讨论这个讲题，主要是因为我们是一个特殊、一个特一的一个族群在这里聚会。
I don't know if you guys think about this, but the fact that a Chinese church would take an American family and send them to Africa is astounding.
但我不知道你们有没有想过，也有可能是我们现在可能是一个在美国的中国华人教会，然后把宣教士送到非洲去。
It testifies to the fact that you're thinking about the gospel.
这个证实了一个，就是我们的核心重点是那个福音 gospel。
And the gospel is more important to you than national boundaries or linguistic boundaries or cultural boundaries.
所以我们对于这个福音的重点是超越我们的语言，超越我们的社群。
So I would like to speak on John chapter 3. I'll do that in a bit, but first I have a video with some slides and things. We're missionaries. You want to see some pictures, right? Okay.
我先开始我要带到的是约翰福音第3章。在我开始之前，我们先看一段我的准备的影片，因为我相信每个人都喜欢看影片。
So you'll see many things that are different here, and that's okay. If you have some questions about anything you see, you can ask me later.
你会看到很多很有趣的事，如果有问题，你可以在 slide 结束之后来问我，从影片看完以后来问我。
The first 3 minutes is our children's school as a promotional video for the school. It shows lots of pictures of the school. And then after that is pictures of our family.
前3分钟是有关于小孩子的 Sunday 的学校，然后后面几分钟是我的家庭在那边的生活。
Okay. So this is just a little bit about our family,
这就是关于我家人的一些事。
and I imagine there might be some things that looked a little strange, and that's okay.
我说过，可能会有些东西看起来很奇怪，但是很正常，这很正常。
So as we think about these differences, one of the things for me as a missionary has been important to think about what is my role in relationship to the church.
谈到这些不同，然后我就以宣教士，我在想说，我要怎么样建立这些关系。
So you have been thinking recently about how to grow in the likeness of God.
你们最近有聊到怎么样去生活更像神，就是更像神的生活。
And I'd like to talk today about how to grow in the likeness of God through joy and less honor.
我要提的是更多的就是怎么样让我们自己的属灵上更像神，但是有一些 What's the mean in less honor？ 快乐
good
in
question.
less honor。不好意思，不知道怎么翻 in less honor。
Not having as much honor as you could have.
OK， 就是没有办法像你想象像你自己要有的那么多的荣耀的方式去过像神的生活。
Yeah. And I know that the idea might be a little bit strange,
我知道这个概念有一点奇怪，
but I think it's fairly clear in John chapter 3 the purpose of having less honor than you might have.
我想在约翰福音第3章有讲到这个你的目的来 honor God 的目的是什么？
And I have a few stories also that I'll share from our work that show why it's important for us to be able to accept less honor with joy.
我有一些例子来分享，怎么样去接受这个比较少荣耀的方式，但是一样来更接近神。
Okay, so, all right. So in John chapter 3, we start out with verse 25. Now, discussion arose between some of John's disciples and a Jew over purification.
在约翰福音第3章的第25节开始就讲到，约翰的门徒和一个犹太人为了洁净的礼仪争辩起来。
Now, notice that this is one Jew and other Jews.
其实你要知道，这是一个犹太人跟另外一个犹太人在说话。
This is not a problem between people who speak different languages.
这应该不是两个不同的民族的人在讨论，
There's not a problem between people who have different cultures.
不是不同的文化，也不是不同的语言。
This is a question about purification, about the law, and how we apply it.
这是有关于这个法律上的规定是什么，清楚的来争辩。
So, in our group in Cameroon, as missionaries, we are sometimes disagreeing, even though we don't have a language problem, we don't have a culture problem.
有时候我在missionary 在宣教的时候，我会觉得我们也会为这种事情来争辩起来。即使我们没有语言的隔阂，即使没有文化的隔阂，我们也会为这个来争辩。
We have colleagues who loved Trump. We have colleagues who hated Trump.
我们有同事喜欢川普，也有同事不喜欢川普。
We have colleagues who think everybody should always be wearing a mask. And we have other colleagues who say nobody should be wearing a mask.
我们有同事也是说，大家都应该戴口罩，也有同事说不需要每个人都戴口罩。
And we don't need language and culture on top of that. Just that much is enough.
我们根本不需要在文化或语言上增加它的复杂度，光是这几个争议点就已经很足够讨论了。
But then when you add language and culture, that is even more often.
但如果你再加上语言上的隔阂、文化上的隔阂，这些东西就会讨论得更激烈。
Verse 26 says, And they came to John, that is John's disciples, came to John and said to him, Rabbi, he who is with you across the Jordan, to whom you bore witness, look, he is baptizing, and all are going to him.
在约翰福音第3章26节这边有讲了，那个门徒来见约翰说：“老师，你看，以前在约旦河对面和你在一起，你为他做见证的那位，在给人施洗，但众人都去他那里了。”
So there are This is a reference to Jesus.
这个是讨论到耶稣。
So if you remember, he who is with you across the Jordan, that's Jesus.
他说那个和你一起在约旦河对岸和你在一起的那个人就是耶稣。
So if you think about it this way, Jesus had disciples, John had disciples.
所以你要想想，在约翰他有门徒，在耶稣那时候也有门徒。
And John's disciples come to John and say, hey, that guy is getting all your disciples.
然后约翰的门徒跑来跟自己老师说：“老师，你知道吗？那个人把你的门徒都带走了。”
Have you never seen what sometimes we call church swapping?
你们有没有看过这个所谓的教会的交换？
Sometimes you have one church that starts to lose some people because there's a new church, a cool church, a younger pastor.
有时候你会看到两个教会一边在失去人，一边在增加人，因为那个年轻的教会增加人的那个可能有更酷的活动，然后更年轻的人牧师更棒的赞美。
I have often spoken to pastors on either side of that equation, and it's a very difficult thing.
我有时候跟两边的牧师都有聊过，其实都是很困难的。
Because as Christians, we want to grow the body in breadth and in depth, not just change people.
对，以基督徒来看，我们是要教会要成长，是要更大、更广、更深，但是不是交换，不是这边少那边多，这样没有增加。
And this has been an issue for me, even in my work. Sometimes someone will come to me and ask for help.
这个也发生在我身上，有时候会有一些人跑到我这边来说，他需要我的帮忙。
And I have thought through how the help should best happen.
然后我也仔细的审查过，想说怎么样帮助这个人，全面性的帮助这个人。
And I will say to them, okay, the first thing is you should do this work and then bring it to me and we'll talk about it.
所以我会跟他说，第一步你先这样做，然后把那边做完了，你再带到我面前来。
And sometimes they will say, that's too hard.
有时候他们会说，哦，太难了。
And they'll want to go and work with someone else who won't ask them to do anything hard.
然后他们会去找另外一个人，不要求他们做任何功课。
But I'm not afraid to do this because the same thing was done by Jesus, right?
我也不害怕有做这种事，因为同样的事情也发生在耶稣身上。
Sometimes the right thing is hard.
有时候正确的事情是很困难的。
But still, even if you believe you're doing the right thing, it's hard to watch somebody walk away and try to find someone else to work with because it's easier.
有时候光是看这个也是很难过的，因为你心里没有办法接受这个人不做功课，你觉得是对的事，然后他离开了你去找别人。
So this is what John's disciples say to him.
这就是约翰的使徒，约翰跟他说的，约翰使徒跟他说的。
And I think John's response is interesting, and that's what the rest of the passage is going to be about.
然后我们来看约翰的回应是什么。
I think my remote is dying here.
Okay, it's coming.
Oh. Okay, so in verse 27, John answered, "A person cannot receive even one thing unless it is given him from heaven."
在约翰福音第3章27节讲到，约翰回答说：“除非是从天上赏赐下来的，否则什么都得不到。”
Think about how does this answer the question?
想想看，为什么这句话回答了前面他的门徒的问题呢？
If someone comes to me and says, "Oh, all of your students are going somewhere else," and I respond, "A person cannot receive even one thing unless it is from heaven."
你就想想看，你的学生如果跑来跟你说，其他人学生都走了，然后你却回答他说，如果没有从天上来的赏赐，什么都得不到，你不觉得很奇怪吗？
I think what John is saying here is nothing counts except for heaven.
我想约翰要说的是，没有一个东西很重要，除非是从天上来的。
If I have a disciple or a student
如
or
果
not,
我有使徒，我有门徒，我有很多的学生，
if people think I'm a big teacher
如果大家都觉得我是很有名的伟大教师，
or a big pastor or a big missionary or whatever,
或是别人觉得我是很厉害的牧师，或是宣教士，都有。
it doesn't matter. What matters is what has God given me.
这些都不重要，重要是神给了我什么。
And I think also interesting, John replies, a person, excuse me, one more. You yourselves heard me bear witness. What I said, I am not the Christ, but I have been sent before him.
约翰自己在下面又继续说：“你们可以为我做见证。我说过，我不是基督，我只是奉差在他前面预备道路的。”
So John is quoting himself.
所以约翰他说到他自己以前说过的话，
This is what he told his disciples earlier.
这就是他跟他门徒所说的话，之前已经说过的话。
And I know you guys have been working more with some of the creeds and the Lord's Prayer, trying to bring that into your daily life, right?
我想这个教会有一直在努力的讲到这个 Apostle Creed， 我们就常常在背的那个，还有使徒信条，还有对祷告文。
And I think this also is a statement that is worth repeating. I am not the Christ.
这句话也是值得常常来附诵的，就是我不是。
Because often we can think about our world as if I am in the center of the world and everything turns around me.
有时候我们会想的是，我们是世界的中心，所有的东西都围着我转。
We don't think about it this way, but we act as if I am God.
我们知道我们不这么想，但是我们的行为有时候会显示出来，我们是这样子做的。
So I think it's helpful for us to remind ourselves, I am not the Christ.
有时候我们要提醒我们自己，我们不是基督。
And then there's this parable.
然后下一个预言。
So to explain things further, John says first, only heaven counts, and I am not the Christ.
约翰继续讲，已经讲了2点，就是只有从天上来的才算数。第二个就是我不是基督。
And then he says in verse 29, a parable, the one who has the bride is the bridegroom. The friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly at the bridegroom's voice. Therefore, this joy of mine is now complete.
接下来他继续讲的就是在第3章第29节说的，娶新娘的是新郎，站在旁边的朋友听见新郎的声音就会欢喜快乐，因此我现在也心满意足。
Now consider there's 3 people here.
我们要来看看这里有3个人，这个故事有3个人。
I don't remember the traditions of Chinese weddings, but when I'm familiar with the wedding, you'll often have a bride and a groom. You have to have a bride and a groom, right?
大家都听懂了。
But you also have a groomsman. You have a best man, right?
你们都有伴郎、伴娘。
And if you think about this, we have the bride and the bridegroom. And we have the friend of the groom, or the best man, who stands and he hears him, and he rejoices.
这边讲到了有新郎新娘，然后新郎的朋友，还有新郎，然后他站在旁边是很开心的。
You can imagine if a friend of yours said, I am getting married to this beautiful woman, and I want you to stand next to me. Would that be a good thing?
你能想象你今天被你的朋友邀请说，今天我当新郎，我要跟这美女结婚了，你站在我旁边，你站在我旁边跟我一起庆祝，你会不会觉得很高兴？
But imagine if on that day you said, I'm not the groom.
你会想象你那天很伤心，然后说我居然不是新郎，
Would that be weird?
会不会很奇怪啊？
It's normal if your friend is getting married, if your friend is the groom, to say, this is a good day. This is a day for joy.
所以你是新郎的朋友的时候，你会应该是很高兴，你的好朋友新郎要跟这个美女结婚了。
And so when I talk about less honor, I'm meaning, what is it like to stand next to the groom and to say, this is the groom's day and it's the bride's day, but I'm their friend. And so I get to have some joy as well, even though I don't have the honor of those two.
所以我之前讲到说，有靠近神的生活，但是比较少的荣耀，就是像这个例子， 这个少的荣耀就像是我是这个新郎的朋友，我站在旁边。今天庆祝的是新郎，而不是我。
So all of creation is about the wedding of Christ and his church.
世界上所有的创造都是在暗指这个像 wedding 一样，像婚礼一样，这个耶稣跟教会的关系。
And if I'm going to be jealous and say, I'm not the one getting married, then I'm going to have a bad problem with my head.
如果我今天因为我的嫉妒而说居然不是我结婚，我很生气，那我就有问题了。
But if I can be happy because Jesus and the church are getting married, then that's a joy for everyone.
但我今天应该要高兴的就是今天耶稣跟教会结合在一起，我就应该为此而高兴。
So as Christians and as Christian workers, we get to be the best man or the bridesmaid.
身为基督徒或是基督徒的宣教士，我们就像这个新郎的好朋友一样。
And so you can see, as John is saying here, therefore this joy of mine is now complete.
就像约翰这边提到的，因此，他就会心满意足。
He says, this is my joy to be here.
他说他很高兴，他只是站在这边，他就很高兴了。
So remember, the disciples come to him and say, Master, teacher, all of your disciples are going over to Jesus.
所以你记得一开始他的学生跟他说：“哎，老师，你的学生都跑到耶稣那边去了吗？”
And instead of being jealous, instead of being sad, he says, yes, that's good.
约翰的反应，他也不是嫉妒，也不是生气，而是很高兴的，心满意足的说：“太好了。”
So I think this is important and an important point of unity. As we think about the unity of the body, it's easy to be jealous of one another's ministry.
我们在这个宣教的这个团体里面，我们很容易会有嫉妒的心，会说这边的宣教比那边的宣教好。
But if I can lose a little honor and gain glory for Jesus, that's good.
但如果在这边学习到我能够少一点荣耀，但是能够让新郎耶稣有更多的荣耀，那是更好的，那是好的。
And this is the verse I think that is a good summary of the whole passage. He must increase, but I must decrease.
这是一个很好的结论，在这个第30节，他说：“他必兴旺，我必衰微。”
He here is Jesus, and I is John in the passage, but I think we can say this too. Anything in life, if Jesus is increasing in glory and honor, and I am decreasing in glory and honor, that's a good thing.
这个里面的 he 他就是指耶稣， I 就是指约翰，但是这个 I 也可以应用在我们自己身上。如果只要 he 耶稣能够兴旺，我自己也可以衰微。
So I have two stories that I want to tell you to exemplify this principle.
我有2个故事可以跟大家分享，来象征这个总结。
They come from each of the two things that I mentioned earlier. One is the church and one is the language committee.
记得我一开始提到我有2个团体，一个是教会团体，一个是语言团体。
So the first one from the church.
第一个从教会的团体来看。
About a month ago, I got an SMS from our pastor in Cameroon.
我1个月以前，我收到简讯，从我的牧师来的简讯。
And he said one of the people in the church has been arrested, and he's in prison, and we need some money to get him out of jail.
我们的教会的成员有1个人被逮捕了，我们需要有些钱去把他赎出来。
And our pastor does not usually ask me for money.
通常我的牧师从来没有跟我谈到钱过。
So I had a lot of questions.
所以我有很多的问题。
And over text, I couldn't answer them.
但是在简讯的沟通方式，我没有办法去问得很清楚。
So I went to visit him the next day, and we had a long conversation.
然后我去拜访我的牧师，然后我们有很长的讨论。
And the thing is, the amount of money they were asking for wasn't that much for me.
他们所需要的钱并不是那么大的一笔数字，对我来说。
I could have just said, okay, here it is, and given the whole amount.
我可以直接的跟他说可以拿去，
Not because I'm wealthy, but because I could find a way of doing that.
并不是因为我有钱，而是因为我有办法来组织这个活动来把钱弄到。
But as I talked with the pastor, I said, what are you doing? What is the church doing? What is really happening here?
在跟牧师聊完了以后，我的问题主要是针对牧师，是说，教会做了什么，你要做什么？
Because think about it, with the friend of the groom, if you go up on a wedding day and you just push the groom aside and stand there, that's a little bit weird, right?
想到再回到这个前面的这个故事，约翰门徒的问题，你会觉得这个新郎的最好的朋友把新郎给推出去说，大家来看我，看我，这样会不会很奇怪？
Yeah, so I could have just paid everything when I think the church should have.
对我来说，我就像那个新郎的好朋友，我可以把教会说没问题，就交给我了。我把牧师说没问题了，就重点在我身上。但
So
其实
if I had done that, it would have been like going to a wedding and pushing the groom aside and saying, no, 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 I will stand here.
所以如果我直接提供帮助的话，就很像是新郎的朋友把新郎推出去说，我来解决。
So I worked and I waited and I listened. And in the end, many, many, many people from the church contributed a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. And the whole sum came together.
所以呢，我们的方法我不是这样做的，我是沟通以后由教会和牧师来向教会的民众说明，让他们来自己解决这个问题。
And I got to contribute something.
那我也有机会来贡献一点点。
But now this man knows that it was the church that got him out of prison.
那这个有问题的这个进到监牢的朋友出来以后，他知道其实是教会帮助他的，
It wasn't the white man's big purse.
并不是这个美国大佬、有钱大佬。
Because frankly, I think that would be exactly the wrong message to say, I'm just going to throw the money on the table and make it happen.
我想，如果我这样做，我把钱全部揽下来的话，我觉得这是个错误的事情，因为我好像说这就是钱，拿去吧。
Yeah. So to help the church do the right thing is a joy for me because I get to see him and the church in good relationship together.
对我来说，能够看到教会把这件事处理完，对我来说是更高兴的事，因为我觉得把这个重点放回教会身上。
Even though it means that I get a little less honor.
即使在这个过程中，我看起来是比较少的荣耀。
The other story that I would have is for a language group called the Quasio.
那另外一个例子我要提的是我在语言的那个团体，那个团体叫 Lesio，
So they had a number of problems with their writing system.
他们有很多写作上的问题，
And so I was asked to go and help them.
所以我被要求去帮助他们。
And so I spent several days in their area visiting with different people, having lots of different conversations.
所以我在那个语言的团体里面，跟很多不同的人谈话，然后
And one conversation, we sat down with several people from the language committee.
有一群人是这个叫做语言的委员会，
And they said, you know, we have a lot of problems.
他说：“你知道的，我们有很多问题，
And this problem and this problem and this problem all come from this one source.
我们这3个1、2、3的问题都来自于同一个原因。
There's a person who has too much influence.
这个原因是这一个人有太多的影响力。
You guys have had this problem before, right?
你们知道这样子的问题吗？对吧？以前，
And so basically they said, can you make him go away?
基本上他们在要求我说，你是不是能把那个人赶走？
And maybe I could have. I don't know.
然后
But I could have tried.
说，也许我可以，也许我也有能力把他赶走。
But I thought about it and I gave a better answer.
然后我思想了一下，我给了一个更好的答案。
I said, what are you guys doing about it?
我问他们说，那你们这个团体要做什么？你们想做什么？
Is he your employee or not?
他是你们的员工吗？是你们的职责下所授权的人吗？
Well, there's a problem
他们说，有问题。
that we actually have this organization who pays his salary.
事实上，我们有另外一个团体组织来付这个人他的薪资。
So they had given the responsibility of paying his salary to foreigners, and so they had less control over him as an employee.
所以他们借由另外一方来付这个员工钱，这样他们呢就对这个员工有比较少的职责需要做管理。
And I don't want to accuse them, but to me, that's a little bit like pushing the groom aside.
对我来说，我并不想来批评他们，但是对我来说，这种情况就好像是新郎的朋友把新郎给推出去一样。
And so what I told them was, well, you guys pay him, and then you can tell him what to do.
所以我告诉他们的方法就是，你应该把这个员工的薪水自己负担起来，这样你就能告诉他你想做什么。
And the more a local community takes responsibility for paying and managing and organizing, the more responsibility they feel, the more ownership and the more honor they have.
所以这个local 这个社群，他们有负责付这个人钱，管理这个人的话，他们比较有能力来做规划。
And this also relates to another issue that I tell almost everyone I work with. One thing every missionary will do.
我也讲到另外一个，就是有一个宣教师会做的事。
That one thing that every missionary will always do is leave.
通常在这种情况下，宣教师通常会做的事就是离开那里。
So if I build the work that I do depending on me, I'm not being responsible.
如果我建立了一个宣教机构的很多人在这里，但是他们通通依赖我的话，这样是不好。
Yeah, if you think about the wedding, the best man is there at the wedding, but he doesn't stay next to the bride and groom every day, every minute.
你想想看，在新郎新娘那个例子里面，那比喻里面，新郎的好朋友不会一直站在新郎的旁边都不离开。
In fact, if the best man insisted on staying next to the bride and groom all the time, that would be wrong.
如果这个新郎的朋友一直站在新郎新娘的旁边的话，这很明显，这新郎的朋友有点问题。
So the purpose is to develop and build the joy and the growth in that relationship, not to seek your own honor.
所以在那种情况下，你要做的是让新郎新娘有他们的时间，然后我自己可以少一点 honor， 少一点荣耀。
And this same people group also had questions, a lot of questions about their writing system. They said, we use this letter, I don't understand why. We use this letter, I don't understand why.
所以在这个语言的社群里面，他们说我们为什么要用这个？我们为什么要用那个？
And I answered basically with the same thing. I said, you need to have people in your group who understand the analysis.
所以在你们我跟他们说的是，在你们的社群里面，你们需要有你们自己的人，然后了解这些语言的用法。
And the more you are participating in the analysis, the more you will understand the analysis, and the more you will be able to act on the basis of the analysis.
所以他说，你们自己有人去研究这些语言的用法以后，你们才能够来决定反映你们要怎么使用这个语言。
And so this is a message that I say often. I say, I want you guys to take responsibility because that's how things will last.
这是我常常跟他们说的一个方法，我的解决的方法就是你们自己要能够做决定。
I want every language committee that takes on a decision to make that their own decision, so it will continue after I'm gone.
我相信这种做法可以使事情走得更长久、更长远。所以他们自己做决定，他们自己做决策，然后把事情都建立好，这样子他们的 program 才会走得更久。
And for the local churches where we relate, I want them to take responsibility for their decisions, again, so that they will continue to worship and relate to Christ even after I'm gone.
所以同样的，在这个社群的教会里面，我也希望他们自己做决定、做决策，这样他们才能在 local 在社群里面存活的比较久。
So every chance I have to shift glory from myself to Christ, or from myself to the church or someone else, everyone benefits.
所以越多我做这种决定，把这些荣耀归给地方的自己的权利或是语言的机构，我这样子越做越多的话，其实这样对大家都好的，然后我会也会做的比较好。
Okay, so a couple more verses just to conclude here.
再来一点经文来做一些结论。
In verse 31, he continues, He who comes from above, that is Jesus, is above all. He who is of the earth belongs to the earth and speaks in an earthly way. He who comes from heaven is above all.
从天上来的超越一切，从地上来的属于地。他所谈论的不外乎地上的事。那来自天上的超越万物。
So Jesus is above all. He repeats this twice. Everything I do, I want to give glory to Jesus.
耶稣自己说了，他所做的一切事情都是来自天上的。
Every day we have a chance to look good.
每一天我们都有机会让自己看起来挺不错的。
But if you take that chance and you say, how can I make Jesus look good?
如果你把这个机会转成怎么样我让耶稣得荣耀，
How can I use that chance to build up my brother or my sister?
我要怎么样使用这个机会来建立我的弟兄姐妹？
I think that is a much, much better example to follow.
我想这是一个更好的效法的对象。
And not just for ourselves, but also consider this last verse. Whoever believes in the Son has eternal life. Whoever does not obey the Son shall not see life, but the wrath of God remains on them. So this, go ahead.
在第9节这边讲，36节讲，信子的人有永生，不信子的得不到永生，上帝的烈怒常在他身上。
So having Jesus is everything.
拥有耶稣就是拥有一切。
My glory is nothing.
我的荣耀不值得讨论。
When we think about unity, whether across language or culture or nationality or whatever, this is what counts.
谈到这个连结 unity 这些就是很好的例子，全部都在神的上面。
Will you believe the Son of God and have life?
当你相信圣子，然后你拥有生命。
If you are with us in doing that, nothing else can divide us.
如果你这样子切切的相信，没有东西可以把我们分开。
Or will you refuse to obey the Son and not see life?
但是如果你选择不去遵照神的教导，
If so, there is nothing that can join us.
同样的这样情况下，你也没有办法加入我们。
So I would encourage you to consider this, the glory of God above everything else.
所以我要请大家考虑这一点，就是神的荣耀超越我们所有一切的荣耀。
Come to Jesus every day and say, I am not the Christ.
每天都来到神的面前，跟神说：“我不是基督。”
But I want your glory above everything else.
所以我要你的荣耀胜过我的荣耀。
Thank you very much.
谢谢大家。
我们谢谢 Ken 他所带来的这个信息。
We thank you, Ken, to bring us a very good message.
那我们也知道 Ken 他对我们教会的这个聚会形式也都非常的清楚。
And we can see Ken know how we gather together, what style we have.
我们接下来就是要照他所讲的来念一下主导文和使徒信经。
So we will, just like he mentioned earlier, we will read Apostles' Creed and prayers,
那
those prayers.
我带各位弟兄姐妹一起来念这个主导文，然后你们就是觉得你们要用英文或者中文都可以哈，那我会用中文来念，我们一起来念主导文。
Let's read it together.
我们在天上的父，愿人都尊你的名为圣，愿你的国降临，愿你的旨意行在地上，如同行在天上。我们日用的饮食，今日赐给我们，免我们的债，如同我们免了人的债，不叫我们遇见试探，救我们脱离凶恶。因为国度、权柄、荣耀，全是你的，直到永远。阿们。 然后接下来念使徒信经。
Now we will read Apostle Creed. 啊，不用，我这样看得到。
好，我信上帝全能的父，创造天地的主。我信我主耶稣基督，上帝的独生子，因圣灵感孕，从童贞女玛利亚所生，在本丢比拉多手下受难，被钉在十字架上受死，埋葬，降在阴间，第3天从死里复活，升天，坐在全能父上帝的右边，将来必从那里降临，审判活人死人。我信圣灵，我信圣而公之教会，我信圣徒相通，我信罪得赦免，我信身体复活，我信永生。阿们。好，我们接下来一起来上三一颂。
Let's sing the theology. Stand up.
Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures in below. Praise Him above, ye heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Amen.
然后我们接下来要一起来祝福，
We will read the benediction.
愿耶和华赐福给你，保护你；愿耶和华使他的脸光照你，赐恩给你；愿耶和华向你扬脸，赐你平安。然后我们最后请Ken 来带领我们做最后的这个祝祷。
And we will invite Kim to come forward to give us a blessing. Great. Blessing.
Father, we thank you for this time to worship together.
天上的父，我们谢谢你给我们这样的时间，一起来敬拜你。
We ask that you would make your glory evident in us.
我们知道你会将你的见证在我们生命中。
And we say yet again, for yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever.
我们知道所有的权柄、荣耀都归你的，永远直到永远。
Amen.
Amen.